think democracy is the rule of the majority and the rights of the minority. I think when you look at women, we fit in on both. The rule of majority, I say the voice, because we constitute 52% of the population. So once we are very much involved in a process, and a process that is very consultative, that is bringing all the parties concerned, it creates an environment of democratic participation. It's one of the values of democracy, and I think that's what we did. We were able to be on the table. We engaged with the military. We brought the youth together. We brought the unions together. We brought all the different levels. We engaged everybody, and we agreed on a consensus. And once we had agreed, a leadership was created within that forum of consultation to lead. And that's how I became a leader in Sierra Leone, because I worked with the unions, with the teachers, with the labor unions, with the university students, with the lawyers, with the doctors and nurses. So we brought everybody on the table, including political party, opposition political parties join us. Remember, I was talking about these are military, this is a military government. So the political parties that had been banned to participate into political activities became part of the bandwagon. So the only people who were left out were the military. So in that regard, you can say that it was fully democratic in the sense that everybody. And I spoke again about the right of the minority, because in the political structures, women are not normally included. We have a very small percentage of women who are in political structure. So even though we are the majority in numbers, we are a minority in the structures that have been created by the state, which makes it almost difficult for us to have a voice. But this opportunity was created in which we were part and parcel, and to a large extent we led it, because the military could not challenge. All the men were afraid they took a back seat. So the women were the one who led it, and eventually we succeeded. So it's, for me, it's democratic under the circumstances in which we found ourselves. And we were fighting for democracy, which we fought. We eventually went into election. A government was elected, and then we started working with the government. How can we see to be able to have more women? And that was the first time in Sierra Leone, as a result of participation, an office for Minister for Social Welfare, Gender and Children was created. We wanted a commission, but the government actually created a Minister for Gender. But that is in recognition of the role that we had played in the peace process. I think the challenge we have as women, we go into this position with a lot of disadvantage. In the first place, until we get to the critical mass where you have more women in position, it becomes a very lonely place, and you don't have a safety net, you don't have support, you know. And so as a result of that, when I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, we started as 3 ministers, and I ended as one, the only woman minister in cabinet. And I think that's very lonely, which means you don't have people you can network with, you can actually share experiences, mistakes, and help to work with you. That's the one big challenge. And the second issue is that when you come from civil society work on values, on issues, on commitments, which is completely different from politics. Politics is almost like a cutthroat. I think the most thing I can say is that in politics, they don't have principles. You know, you do things by the day as they come, you respond. And I think the challenge we have as women and men, that is from my own personal perspective, I might be right or wrong, but that's what I feel. Women see politics as a way of achieving results, as a way of making a difference, as a way of doing things that will improve the lives of women and other people. We go into politics just the way we are in civil society. That, you know, I'm a human rights activist, I document atrocities, I report it, I monitor it. It means I have an interest in the way women's rights are violated. That's what I want. But on the other hand, men go into politics because of what they will gain from it, because of the power it gives them, power of control of people, control of resources, will be able to make them do things that they feel will enhance them. And so there is this huge difference. And so we definitely don't fit in because we don't play the games according to the rules. And so it becomes very lonely. So you don't fit in as a woman, because then you're contradictory with the men, the way they see the power game, the way they play politics. If I'm Minister of Health, as I was Minister of Health for 2 years, I want to see how many hospitals get drugs. I want to see how many of these drugs reach the health facilities. I want to make sure I reduce the number of women who die. So I spend more time on the ground, which I did in my country. If you go there, people will tell you, I have been one of the best health ministers. I can't say I'm the best, but one of the best health ministers who was able to achieve. When I took over, we were losing $1 million worth of drugs for the free health care we were providing for pregnant women, lactating mothers, and children under 5. Within a year, I changed that figure to 0. Because for me, I needed to put structures in place that will make sure the drugs actually reach the women. Because I'm a woman. It's different when a man is there. You know, and I think that is one of the biggest challenges we have as women, Minister. The second issue is that women don't form strategic network that will help them. You look at the media, most of the people who have the media are the men. So they have friends out. Women are lonely in the sense that you don't develop the strategic network that will support you, because your concentration is not to build power. Your concentration is to deliver. So you focus on the job you are doing. To an extent, you become isolated. You lose touch with even your own constituency. But the men, it's a different way, because the people who are in the newspapers are all men. So they have that friendship and relation and network, and after work, they go into pub, into clubs, and network together. As a woman, when you leave the office, the next place you run to is your home, because you have a home to run. You know, and I think that's the second issue. And the third issue, as somebody who has worked as an activist in corruption, you have women are less corrupt as politicians. Yes, there are politicians, women who are corrupt, but women, in terms of comparatively, women are less corrupt, because women don't spend extra resources more than is required. Because as I said, from home, whatever extra resource, additional resource they have, they spend it into their home after the office. Men have extra activities that makes demand on their time, on their resources, which makes it very difficult and complicated for them. And I think those are some of the challenges and the differences. So it comes out as no surprising that countries that have more women in political positions, like the Scandinavian countries or like Rwanda, are doing far better in providing social services for their people in terms of health, in terms of education, and spend less resources in areas like in the Scandinavia, like defense. You know, and you know, in most of the Scandinavian countries, they don't have nuclear. The reason being that they rather prefer to spend that money into education, improving the lives of people, and agriculture. And I think that is something that most people have to start looking at, because the more women you have in political positions, in decision making, the more better the decisions that are made at that level that will help improve the life of the ordinary man. For me, I think that is an experience that I have come to realize. When you're a woman minister and you are in a very strategic position, you have a comparative advantage, especially for people like us who have been civil society, who have name recognition, and we are women. So if you stand aside of your colleagues, it's easier for you to be praised, to be recognized, to be applauded. The challenge you face is how to make yourself not very visible, so at the end of the day, you do not become a target. That's a difficult role to play, because you don't want to make yourself too visible. Then obviously you become a target to everybody, thinking that you're trying to build your profile. At the same time, you want to make sure your voice is heard, you cannot be too abrasive, and you make a point. It's a very delicate position to walk when you're a woman politician, because I think the problem most women have encountered is trying to prove that they are also capable. And once you start doing that, you start doing things that you want to show that you are better off or you are at the same level with the men. You lose sight of who you are and what you're doing. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges you face as a woman. And so for me, what I had to do was just be myself. Ignore. And that's not very easy in politics because it means you isolate yourself. We have more women activists and civil society than men. Because with activism, you work on principle, you work on value, which contradicts when you go into politics. And I think, obviously, there is always a clash. How do you make sure that what you're working on is what you really believe in? When you know in politics, it's not the truth. You know, it's a vicious game, it's a game of lies, it's a game of manipulation, it's a game of saying things that you yourself do not believe in, but what you think that people want to hear, you know you're not convinced about it. And so you become a little caught in between. And I believe that's one of the reasons why women don't get to the top, to like being president and prime minister. They fall along the line because I think it becomes very difficult for them, conscious-wise, to say, is this what I want? Do I really want to be? You know, who am I? I don't fit here. You know, this is not. And I think we can only change that if we have more women in politics, because then you all think alike. Then you can be able to pursue. But as long as you will still have that percentage below 10% or maybe 10, 15%, those women who are there find it extremely difficult to cope, and eventually they just drop out, they move on, because they feel I don't belong to this place, this is not what I expected. I was working to ensure the empowerment of women. I was working for the interest of the girl child. Here I come now. You know, look at the figures they are putting before me. This is not the truth. This is not how it's. So it becomes a very depressing and challenging experience for lots of women how to handle it. And I think the reason being that because we are not in control of the political structures of the party, we do not set the agenda. And we don't work very well with women who are in the civil society to back us up. And there's no training to prepare women for that, or there's no supporting mechanism built to support women who are in those positions. So they fight a very difficult battle within themselves. And later it becomes very difficult to cope. And I think these are things that we need to talk about. We need to be able to support women who are in this position, to give a helping hand to them, to find out what are the challenges and the struggle that they are going to be through, and to be able to galvanize support for them, mobilize support so that these women can be able to sustain the work they are doing. Because I do believe until we are on that table where the issues are discussed, that we can be able to make sure that issues that are of critical concern to us are discussed on the table. If we're not there, the decisions are taken by men. And so the decisions are not in our own interest. Secondly, we have to be there on the table where the resources are distributed for the rest of the country, for the rest of activity. If we're not there, you know, the resources will be distributed not according to things that are of interest to us. They will be according to things that are of interest to men. And I think these are all the issues that we have to discuss, and why we have to make sure that we have more women on the table where decisions are made, more women on the table where resources are distributed, so that our interests or the issues that are of critical concern to us are actually put on the table, and they are given adequate resources to be able to address these things. And I think these are all some of the problems that we face as women. We cannot run away from it. The reality is that we have to have more women in politics. Until we do have to have more women in politics, we cannot be able to make a difference. And to be able to have more women in politics, we also have to empower the women, the grassroots, economically. Because the more economically independent they are, the more they can make economic political decisions that will affect the way they vote to support women to be in. So it's a vicious circle, and we really have to address all of this issue if we're able to break through, or else we will always be there as activists and not being able to influence decisions happening in our country.